So in addition to adding all this wonderful knowledge into the decision-making process, it also builds relationships, like Matt said. I mean, we're not just coming to people at the end when something's decided. We're collaborating and working with people from the beginning, sharing information and learning from each other, and that should gain support for local projects and make them better. At the same time that all this is happening, we're all learning from each other. At the same time that we're learning from locals, locals are learning from all of the agency people that we bring out there, having different understandings of the vegetation data that's collected, or marsh fragmentation, all these different things. And so when you put all of that together, it can really be a tool that will improve the way that restoration is done now.
That's right, and just a point to add there, the process that we were tasked to develop is a systematic process, so it's that it can be transferable and replicated by the state. So it wasn't just something, we wanted to give them a method that's based on the scientific method. It's a systematic process that can be replicated.
And we had some principles of community engagement. We wanted to collaborate and build partnerships in the community and always be respecting the local knowledge. We're taking people's time who are very busy businessmen, and we want to, and women, I suppose, and we want to always honor that they're giving us their time, that they're taking off of work. And one way that we did that is we paid for everyone like they were consultants. We paid for their time, we paid for their gas, we worked around their schedules, and these are all parts of the ways that this would have to be in order for the method to work. When conditions change, or oyster grounds open and schedules change, and so we have to be pretty flexible and fluid so that participating with us is not hurting their business.
All right, the scope for the project that we decided on was basically the Barataria Basin. And we chose this for a number of reasons. One was that one of the main intentions of the project was to expand upon Matt's previous dissertation research. And the study area for that previous research was the small red hatched area, Grand Bayou community area. So it logically made sense for us to, if we wanted to expand the possibilities and applications, then we just literally expanded the test area to all the Barataria Basin. The cross-hatched area in the blue-green color actually represents the extent to which all of the various fishermen and participants took us out on trips. And we'll get into it a little bit more later, but one of the ways that we collected some of the data was to have GPS tracking coordinates for each one of our trips, and to also be able to pinpoint down any significant spots that the participants brought us to. So that crosshatched area, as you can see, although I say Barataria Basin, some of the participants saw that it was so important to bring us to see, contrast both sides of the river, that it kind of expanded and it's not specifically tied down to just the Barataria. And as I started to hint to, some of the reasons right here are why we expanded it to the larger Barataria Basin. The main is to test more applications over a wider study area. Barataria Basin also affords pretty much every type of major restoration project that is planned, either ongoing or planned for in the future. There's several diverse communities that all have individual, unique, rich cultural histories to be able for us to explore the different types of backgrounds.
Okay, so how did we figure out, oh, that's you, go ahead, I'm sorry. Running you over.
Sorry. So to start off and to try and get the ball rolling, we wanted to get a baseline assessment of what were the most hot topics, controversial issues that kept coming up. So to do this, we went to recent public meetings that were going on at the time. We looked at different newspaper articles, specifically the online, like NOLA.com articles, where we were able to look at the comments that public were making after. Gave us a lot of insight. So that's kind of where we started. And from that, we came up with an initial 4 issues. Those were ridges, the planning for diversions, marsh creation, and then also how siphons and diversions were being operated. So once we started going out with participants and starting to kind of delve into the community a little bit more, obviously the list expanded significantly, and we realized that it wasn't logical to think that just because what we were seeing in public comments, and meetings were the only main concern. So here are some of the other concerns that came out once we started interacting in the community.
Right, and that's an important point for this process, is that we didn't set the agenda when we went out with these guys. We just contacted them, called them up and say, you take us where you want to show us. And then these issues emerged from all of that data and information that we got on those trips.
Which is also significant in and of the process itself, that if you just trying to get an assessment of the important issues from what's going on in the public media, you realize that if you actually start getting out into the community and out on boats, that might not necessarily be the most significant issues to the people in every day.
Okay, so how did we find these awesome people that gave us their time and took us on their boats? First thing we did was we identified all of the meeting places people would gather, whether it was where people dry docked their boats, where if it was a marina or a coffee shop or a bar, whatever it was, we went down and we asked people, that's us with the yellow head, we asked people, other than yourself, who has expert knowledge of the Barataria Basin? And if we were talking to shrimpers, we asked them about shrimpers. If we were talking to oyster farmers, we asked them about oyster farmers. So we did this process for about a month. I mean, we were still kind of ironing out how we would do it. And we ultimately, we got 409 different referrals. And what started to happen is we started to see certain names getting said again and again and again. And so we compiled a list of those names and went back to the communities, twice to each community, and said, on this list, who would you refer? And is there anyone that we left off? And people would say things like, man, anybody on this list is going to be a great person to go out with, and they would then vote. So that led us to the final 13 people that we brought out, or that brought us out, I should say, on the water. And they represented a wide array of interests and different specialties. We had 9 guys who had shrimping experience or were currently shrimping. We had 6 people with oyster farming experience. We had crabbers. We had navigation people. We had charter, recreational fishing, recreational hunting, and trapping. We really tried to make sure that we covered all the different kinds of harvesting activities that took place in the Barataria Basin.
Right, and the 2 geographical locations that our TEK experts came from were the Lafitte area in Jefferson Parish, as well as the Port Sulphur Empire area down in Lower Plaquemines Parish.
Yeah, all the way up to Myrtle Grove. So we had some people that were out of Myrtle Grove and down in Empire. So I mean, we really tried to catch, of the people who were most referred, all of the communities along our study area. So. Okay, so how it would work is we would contact the people and let them know and try to schedule fishermen, which can be a little bit tricky. And we would say, you know, we want you to take us, like Corey said, wherever's most important to you. The day is yours, be our teacher. And the guys really thought about it. They put together a lesson plan really for us. They brought books, they brought maps, they showed us this is what it looked like in this year. And this is what I ate that year at a party, right? And then this is what it looks like now. You couldn't eat the oyster macaroni here now, right? And so that process really allowed them to be in their own environment and to be stimulated by the environment. So they could, you know, oh, and another thing, or oh, I forgot to mention this to you. And so we'd have about 8 hours out with the guys, and it was just so much learning all the time. But we had certain equipment with us to help to enhance that process. We recorded all the conversations with permission of the fishermen, and we transcribed it with the promise only we'd see it. And we had a Trimble, which is a handheld GPS device, which Corey kind of alluded to. We could make spaghetti models of where we went. We could drop points down where the guys brought us to certain places. And we had maps. And for anybody who's a fisherman or a hunter or even a coastal scientist, maps are really this super common language. It brings everyone together. People can just sit around and talk for maps, about maps forever. And the last thing that we started bringing was a salinity meter. Danny Coulon actually had a little fish tank one, and it sparked for us to start bringing it on all the trips. And we would look at the impacts of different freshwater introduction systems or different weather conditions and look at how the salt was wherever they were taking us. And some of the guys were so good, within 1 part per thousand, they could taste it and tell us how salty that water was without us having to use our meter. So this is a map of where everyone took us. If you can kind of see, this is also the small map that's on the paper in front of you. The different colors are different fishermen and where they brought us, and then the little yellow dots are places that they had something important to say. You know, this is, I wanted to show you this because this is successful or not successful, or it's already gone or it's going to be gone. So that outside barrier of all those routes, that's what set the study area.
And as an additional kind of parameter for us in defining what our scope was going to be is we thought that it wouldn't really be too practical, and that people kind of, if they lived in Lafitte, would stay close to Lafitte. If they lived Port Sulphur or Myrtle Grove, would stay in that area. But as you can see right here by this wonderful, beautiful weather day that we had, we were able to launch from Lafitte and travel all the way down and have a hamburger, courtesy of one of our good friends down at the marina in Grand Isle. So they actually thought way more holistically about the basin as a total system and an estuary than we had thought going in to try and set our scope.
Yeah.
And with that kind of data, what you can do from a spatial standpoint is represent that data and here's an example of like a density cluster map. So you can see where multiple guys took us the most. So maybe there was something significant about these areas. That's up around the Lafitte area, down in Mud Lake, over here near Grand Bayou in the West Point Allahatchie Siphon, down at the Barrier Islands. These were all hotspot areas that the guys were taking us to, and you know, there's all kinds of things you can do with this data, and this can be applicable in other studies, such as more focused issue studies like we're doing with another study that's similar, focused on sea level rise issues. And we didn't only collect TEK data from the guys. We also collected scientific data. And we did this for two reasons. One is because the data, the information that the guys were giving us and the information that we had gotten from the Grand Bayou people in the previous project showed us that certain parameters, you know, were important for restoration and important for making decisions about restoration. One of those were vegetation. You know, we'd be out and all the guys, you know, they'd point out typically, you know, aspects of greenness related to the vegetation, where it was dying, where it wasn't, how that related to restoration prioritization issues. Also, marsh fragmentation was a big one, like where it's broken up, where it's still firm, where it used to be firm, where it's broken up now. So those parameters started being talked about a lot, and those are the things that we thought, okay, we can do scientific data sampling to help create a map that would represent this layer to help illustrate these phenomena across our study area to the fishermen, and eventually help map this TEK information in our process. The other thing that it did was that it helped us to transfer technology both ways, or transfer information both ways. So it was a reciprocal knowledge transfer on these trips. It wasn't just us collecting TEK information. We also wanted to show them how typically the state does scientific sampling. You know, they'd see these white poles out in the marsh a lot, and there's all these myths about them. You know, what are these? They'd see state people coming out every once in a while in airboats and taking samples. Well, what are they doing there? There wasn't any communication. So through this process, we were able to show them what the state scientists sample for at these locations. Many of you know are CRIM stations and other vegetation and hydrology stations that are typically sampled. And so it allowed that process, and it helped us generate maps, which Michelle mentioned earlier, sparked conversation. And one of the maps we generated was a turbidity map.